Court to intervene in the whole SASSA matter to ensure basically that grants will be paid. And of course now the new concern is about April the 1st, the post office stepping in. Let's chat with CEO of Freedom Under Law, Nicole Fritz. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So the court's saying there's another extension. Obviously it's not great, but is it fair enough given the circumstances?
Yeah, I don't think that anyone could have been surprised by the court's order today. We know that the court was enraged that it had been put in this position. The court saying at the hearing, Chief Justice Mogoeng saying that they were being laughed at, Justice Kempepe saying that they were essentially being blackmailed, but there was no other alternative, and the court, as the highest guardian of the Constitution, wasn't going to countenance this idea that the most vulnerable of South Africans would be left without payment come 1st April. So as much as they did this unwillingly, they complied and they granted the extension for 6 months.
Couldn't this even happen again? Because you look at it, apparently Cash Paymaster Services has this massive infrastructure. This is a South African problem. Too many people need to go and stand in lines to get their cash instead of going to ATMs and things like that. And they have the infrastructure and the post office just doesn't. Nobody does.
I think that is absolutely the fear. There was some discussion about this again at the court hearing. The idea was why didn't SAPO in fact offer the payment, cash payments? They would essentially have to buy that infrastructure from CPS at huge cost, at a cost that was prohibitive. Yeah. So yes, the fear obviously is that we will come 6 months be facing a similar situation. One has to hope, though, that SASSA is going to follow the prescripts of the expert panel that was set up this time last year by the Constitutional Court to monitor the transition to a new social grant payment system. The Constitutional Court today saying that the expert panel must provide reports and provide scrutiny on a more regular basis. So those reports are going to have to come in on a monthly basis now. And the expert panel has always been aware of the problem with cash payments and has for several months now been saying that new technologies and infrastructure would have to be investigated in order to move those dependent on the current system off to make it less prohibitively expensive. But those recommendations have been ignored by SASSA, and that of course is a very worrying issue.
Yeah. Have you seen this before where a court says a contract is unlawful, but there are structures in place which means you basically can't get out of that contract? You spoke of the frustration of the judges, but this is a very strange situation.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think that the court has been asked to go beyond what a court typically is required to do, and I think we have to applaud the Constitutional Court for putting in place this structural supervisory mechanism. But even that, with these very tight controls in place, that those have been bypassed essentially by SASSA, by the Department of Social Development, to essentially keep in place a contract that has for years now been understood to be invalid.
Do you have hope? I mean, a lot of this was linked to the preferences, it's alleged, of the previous minister.
So, I mean, you know, we were concerned. I mean, one of the Constitutional Court today saying not only, I mean, we've just had final arguments in respect of former Minister Bathabile Dlamini's personal liability in respect of the social grants crisis last year. The court is now saying today she must again show cause why she should not be held personally liable and be liable for personal costs. Not only her this time, but also Ms. Pearl Bengu, who's acting CEO. Now, you'll recall that at the time of the hearing, SASSA came to the court, they said there's no contingency plan, so you have no option to extend. 2 days later, at a press briefing, they said, in fact, there is a contingency plan. The Constitutional Court was enraged. I mean, obviously, because they felt that they'd been misled, they issued directions. They said, come and tell us, what is this contingency plan that you withheld from us at the hearing? And Ms. Bengu had to go on affidavit and say, in fact, there is no feasible contingency plan. And to the extent that I said that at a media briefing, I was essentially misleading the public in saying there is a contingency plan in place.
So now I'm enraged as a member of the media as well. Is there anything, because I presume you would like to stop this ever happening again, where the vulnerability of millions is exploited, where the highest court in the land, like it says, is held to ransom? But is there anything that can be done to prevent this ever happening again?
Well, I mean, one has to hope that with greater scrutiny that the court has put in place, that is going to prevent this. That you know, it's not only the former minister, but it's now the acting CEO that is facing personal liability and a costs order. That will be a sufficient deterrent. I mean, we obviously wanted to see more. We asked that there be an investigation conducted into those within SASSA that are obstructing a transition to a new social grants payment regime. We wanted CPS to pay back the profits that we feel have been improperly gained. At this point, the court did not grant that. We certainly hope that what they've put in place today will be sufficient to prevent a reoccurrence of this.
Okay, we do have the court saying that 316 million rand, I mean, this is a contract worth billions, but 316 million must be returned to SASSA from CPS. What do you understand about that judgment? What's behind this part of the payment?
Right, so I mean, again, I think there is a sense, obviously, that CPS has been overcharging in respect of the services that it was contracted to undertake. So the court, the North Gauteng High Court, in a separate judgment today, saying that monies must be returned to SASSA, that CPS was essentially overcharging SASSA for the services that it contracted for. I think the public should be grateful for the intervention of Corruption Watch. This was another civil society organization, and it was at their initiative that this has come about. You know, we had asked the court, we had said on CPS's own acknowledgement, it has earned over 700 million rand in profits. We think to some extent that is a misstatement of its profits, because it paid more than $1 billion in licensing fees to its parent company, Net1. So CPS has earned millions off this contract. There has to be greater scrutiny of that, and to the extent that government, the taxpayer has been overcharged, that money must be returned. We're talking about the most vulnerable, the most destitute in South Africa, and that money needs to be safe kept so that social grants are not in jeopardy, and our country's ability to make those payments is not in jeopardy.
Right, and thanks for your work on an issue affecting millions of South Africans. That was Nicole Fritz from Freedom Under Law.